Okay, so we were exploring the question of how can we move from voluntary activity on local economy work to creating a livelihood, being paid for it. And we started talking in two ways. One about how as individuals we could be paid for setting up enterprises, but then quite quickly identified that there is a need for people who are playing a connector role, so people who are supporting the development of new enterprises, who are the infrastructure for the development of new enterprises, to also be paid, and that needs to be recognised as a role. We had a conversation around how individuals can create a mixed economy of income to meet their needs, so whether that's lecturing part-time, running workshops, doing some consulting, but quite quickly moved on to thinking about how can we work with existing strands of funding or existing strands of money to get those to the people who need to be paid and supported. So, for instance, rather than the local authority hiring someone to do a business development role, can a co-op of people with those skills locally come and fulfil that need? So, using existing sources of income but differently. Are there opportunities whereby successful enterprises can sort of pay a tithe back to the mothership that helped to incubate them to support future enterprises, or successful enterprises using some of their surplus to support business development for future enterprises? So all ways of getting money to support the business development function. There was a real kind of tipping point in the conversation where there was an intervention that said, I don't think voluntary time is a helpful way to think about it. That's a very much, we need to think about activists, we need to think about entrepreneurs, we need to think about people who are self-starters, who've got the energy, the time, who can make the sacrifice to do this. And that took us into a conversation around, okay, that's all very well if you're in a place where you can do that. So how do we create the sources of funding that enable people who aren't in a position to give their time for free for a period before something becomes viable? And began talking about models within the cooperative movement where people who work for co-ops are putting £1 a week into a fund, which can then be used to finance startup activities and fund those who don't have access to money or time that they can put in freely on their own. We then began exploring, okay, well, where else is this happening? We talked about Mondragon in Spain and say, well, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? Well, they run their own bank, they run their own universities, they're operating at scale. And there were some reflections on part of the Mondragon concept or ideas beginning to be explored in the UK, particularly around keeping the money flows from statutory institutions, so procurement for local authorities, NHS, etc., local. Something that really struck me, we then began talking about scale. Okay, what scale do we need to be operating at? And one thing that really struck me was we need to think about lots of small, not big. So this idea of working in a networked way, the networked entrepreneur.
Well, for 3 minutes, Jo, so you need to just...
And that brings me neatly to the end of things I wanted to say, unless there are key things I've missed that others wanted to throw into the mix. It was a really rich conversation. I really appreciate everyone's time and thoughts.
Thank you.